I actually had some pretty big injuries when I was a kid. I slid into home plate. I think I was like 12 years old, and I broke my ankle. And then a couple months later, after the ankle heals, my knee starts to hurt, and I realized that at the time I broke my ankle, I also tore my medial meniscus. So I had to have knee surgery after that, and then ended up coming back too soon again, and then tearing the other medial meniscus in my next knee. I guess the one that wasn't destroyed to begin with.
How old were you?
I want to say I was 12,
Holy cow.
and then 14 with the second one.
Wow.
And I remember going to the doctors, and they had told me that sports after high school probably weren't a possibility.
Mm.
And I didn't really take that advice very well.
So interesting that you, by the age of 14, had all of those injuries.
I don't know if I
And
ever told you about that.
no, I don't think so. Here's the part that blows my mind. The research now shows that what Meredith went through is exactly the kind of risk that comes from early sports specialization, when kids train the same muscle groups in the same motions year round. John Hopkins, the AAP, American Association for Pediatrics, and the National Trainers Association all say the same thing. Kids who specialize early are at a much higher risk for overuse injuries, burnout, and dropping out entirely.
Yeah, and what pops up for me too is as you're saying this is I'm getting flashbacks as well of coaches telling me to, oh, it's fine. Like my knee does that too. Just keep going. Just keep going. And I have a lot of resentment towards that. I also see that a lot in my work currently with high school athletes.
What stands out is how often she was celebrated for pushing through pain. Not because anyone meant harm, but because that's still the culture. Toughness over signals, performance over protection. And yet, the research is so clear. Kids who specialize too early or train year round are at higher risk for overuse injuries, burnout, and disconnecting from the sport they love. When adults brush off a child's pain, that child learns to brush it off too and to not trust themselves. Meredith's story is a reminder that pain, physical or emotional, is information. It's not weakness. It's a signal. And she said something that stayed with me long after we stopped recording. I'm Dr. Jess Hayden, and you're listening to Simply Heard, The Space Between, a podcast about the stories under the performance, the feelings that shape us, and the moments where we finally feel heard. It's the space between who we've been and who we're becoming. And today, we're stepping back into that space with Meredith Grimes, licensed clinical mental health counselor and former Division II softball player. In our last episode, part 1, we talked about awareness, opposite action, thinking errors, and how validation helps athletes regulate big emotions. If you missed it, I encourage you to go back and listen. The skills we talk about aren't just for athletes, coaches, and parents. They apply to everyone. So give a listen, if you haven't already. Now, as Meredith would say, back to the pod.
And I don't like that we are teaching kids to push past these physical injuries and ignore the inner emotions that we are feeling, whether that is mental, emotional, or physical.
When Meredith said that we're teaching kids to ignore both physical and emotional pain, it opened the door to something bigger. Because once a child stops listening to their body, they often stop listening to themselves. And that's where identity gets tangled up in sport. Remember this from the last episode?
I think I learned from a young age too that if I played well, then people liked me. And I got lots and lots of positive attention, which then kind of translated into me kind of seeing my worth as my productivity.
When your worth is measured in innings pitched, points scored, or how tough you can be, it becomes harder to separate who you are from what you produce. And for so many young athletes, especially the ones who are really good, the pressure doesn't just come from within, it comes from parents, coaches, teammates, the stands, sometimes the whole town. When I asked Meredith what young athletes struggle with the most, her answer was surprising yet not.
Honestly, like dealing with their parents
Ooh.
and a fear of failure.
Did you catch that? She said it pretty quietly. She said, dealing with their parents.
That's why I think it's really important to constantly be checking in with our high achieving young athletes and making sure that this is what that they want to do, making sure that they still love the sport, love the game, and are getting something out of it and are happy playing the sport in the game, whatever it might be. I think that's important. I think we often overlook that, and I think it's easy for parents and supporters and teammates and coaches to get caught up in the success of it.
Yeah.
But I think we really have to like pay attention of when that pressure becomes too much
Mm-hmm.
and what that looks like.
And what does that look like?
Um, I think like being aware of your kid, like making sure that their goals are not your goals.
Mm. Exactly. Because when a parent's goals start becoming the motivation, kids stop listening to their own signals and start performing for someone else's approval. And that's where things can slide into pushing their bodies in ways they're just not built for yet.
Oh, I know like boys shouldn't be throwing movement pitches until they hit puberty,
Okay.
and being aware of if they are trying to throw a curveball before they have chest on their hair hair on their chest, then we should be aware of that and kind of check in with them and what their intent is, what's driving that extra push.
That was too funny to cut. When a child's identity becomes wrapped around performance, any dip feels like a crisis. Puberty hits, competition increases, they get benched, they move up to college or get injured, and suddenly it feels like failure because they're thinking, I don't know who I am anymore. What's my worth or value? Do I even belong here? And this is the moment where so many athletes start to unravel, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they never learned who they were outside of being good. Okay, parents, coaches, teachers, therapists, counselors, this is for you. This is why praising the process matters so much. The effort, the practice, the persistence, and letting kids know they're loved and valued for who they are, not how they perform. When a child grows up hearing, I'm proud of how you show up, instead of only, I'm proud you won, they build the kind of internal foundation that can hold them when things get hard. Because eventually, there will be a moment when the game changes, an injury that takes them out, a plateau they didn't expect, or leveling up to collegiate play where suddenly everyone is just as talented, just as driven, and just as good. And if a young athlete's sense of worth was tied to being the best for always performing, those moments can feel like an emotional earthquake. And here's where Meredith and I talk about that. What happens for athletes when their body breaks down or the level of competition jumps and they're forced to confront a version of themselves they've never had to meet before?
I was so lucky to not have to live that.
Mm-hmm.
I think every athlete's fear is like a torn ACL
Yeah.
or a torn Achilles.
Yep.
And I know those are so devastating, season ending, half the time career ending. I think that's also like a lot of athletes rock bottom as well, and kind of where they figure out who they are moving on from an injury.
That's such a powerful reframe because when everything stops, you're finally confronted with yourself. And I think what's interesting is that athletes don't only hit that identity crisis when the game ends, they also hit it when the game changes. Like we talked about before, when kids go off to college and they level up.
You go to college and everyone there was once the best athlete, was once the best
They were
player.
the top dog.
Yes, you're on a team of top dogs.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard. And kind of like adopting your, I definitely struggled with that of coming to a whole new school and not being the best player on the team. And I think like that's a big test too of how are you going to get better? Like, what does that look like for you? How are you going to deal with being like maybe the fourth or fifth best hitter?
Yeah.
Is it tolerable?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also makes you question like your values as well. I know I keep mentioning values a couple times of what kind of teammate are you?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about like emotion as well. I think a lot of emotion can come up during this time too.
Mm-hmm.
And some envy, some jealousy, and where
Mm-hmm.
that goes as a teammate.
What I appreciate about Meredith's story is the honesty about what happens when you're suddenly surrounded by people who are just as talented as you are. That shift can stir up a lot, especially jealousy and envy. And I want to clear up something once and for all: the differences between jealousy and envy. Jealousy is the fear of losing someone or something to someone else. In sports, this would look like fear of losing my position to someone else, fear of losing my status. There's usually more than one person involved. Envy is the desire to have what someone else has. Oh my gosh, you're starting. I'm so envious. I want that. Jealousy. I'm feeling really jealous and worried that coach might demote me to second string and start Meredith instead. So, jealousy is about protecting what you fear losing, and envy is about resenting what someone else has. And as with all emotions, we can use them as information to help drive us forward to achieve our goals. However, they can have a negative effect on us if we let them run the show. Jealousy looks like protecting my starting position, trying to outshine teammates, overtraining, constantly checking the competition, seeking reassurance, maybe getting a little territorial about your role or your jersey number, and interpreting normal rotation or feedback as a threat. It can also look like
Not cheer for them when
not
they're
cheer
up to
for them,
bat or
talk stuff, talk smack, talk smack about them behind their backs. And envy is similar, comparing your stats or times, downplaying someone else's success, wishing they might mess up, or giving up on effort. And if your goal is for your team to win, to get better at the sport, or to get along with your teammates and your coach, you might need to do the opposite of what the action urge is telling you to do, especially if it's going against the goal. And here's the thing: emotions, these emotions, they're human. They're not bad or good, they just are. They're information. We can use this information from envy and jealousy to push us towards our goals by helping us see what we value and where we want to grow. Or we can allow them to pull us away from our goals if we let them run the show through pettiness, comparison, or shutting down. It's like a fork in the road moment. Do I let envy inspire me, or do I let it turn me bitter? Do I use this jealousy to understand what I'm afraid of losing, or do I sabotage myself because someone else is shining? This is the part I don't think we talk about enough: the emotional labor of being a teammate, not the star. And once you understand those emotions, jealousy, envy, the fear of losing your place or wanting what someone else has, you start to see how much the environment around an athlete shapes those feelings. Because athletes don't just wake up competitive or insecure, they respond to the culture they're in. Now, I know a few of you may be thinking, well, my kid's always been competitive, or I've always been competitive. And there's probably a reason for that that includes some part of personality traits that are maybe a little bit fixed, but I might argue that too. And I would also say that the environment is one of the major contributing factors to competitiveness.
Well, also like to coaches, I hope some coaches are listening too, and I think a lot of the time we kind of like tell our players like what we want them to value and what these core values are of part of this team, and those may not, probably won't align with each individual player, and that is okay. I think it would be very beneficial for coaches to ask the players to come up with their own values
Mm.
and then kind of incorporate them all together. And go ahead.
No, you go. I was just thinking like, ooh, like a whole new coaching program that you could put together.
One day. One
Like,
thing.
okay, I edited this part out because I was umming and trying to remember things. I took a motivation class at UNC Chapel Hill, and we learned about Ed DC and Richard Ryan, the pioneers of self-determination theory out of the University of Rochester, and it was quite fascinating. I have an urge to get into the thick of it, and I'm going to try to keep it a little bit more surfacey for y'all. Self determination theory gives us a really simple framework for understanding what helps athletes thrive. It states that every athlete, no matter their age or skill level, needs three things to feel motivated, confident, and connected. The first thing is autonomy, and this is the sense of having a voice and some choice in their experience. Secondly, it's competence, the feeling of growing, improving, and knowing what you're working towards. And the third is relatedness, the experience of belonging, being valued, and feeling connected to the people around you. When coaches support those three needs, something shifts. Athletes don't feel like they have to compete for worth or protect their spot. Jealousy softens, envy softens, and the team culture becomes one where people feel safe enough to be themselves. That's when motivation becomes internal, confidence becomes stable, and performance becomes sustainable. Self-determination theory isn't just a theory, it's a roadmap for creating teams where kids actually want to show up, contribute, and grow. If we take self-determination theory out of the research world and put it in the locker room or on the field, it becomes really practical. Coaches can use self-determination theory by intentionally supporting those three needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness in the way they talk, teach, and lead. And really, this isn't just for coaches. So how do we do this? Coaches can support autonomy by helping athletes feel like they have a voice and some choice. This can look like asking athletes what they value and what their goals are. They can offer choices. Do you want to start with this drill or that drill? And they can explain the why behind decisions and invite feedback and ask things like, how did that feel? Is there anything you guys want to try differently? Above all, though, it's really important to avoid trying to use control, shame, and threats. We want to create an environment where kids feel ownership instead of pressure. Okay, now on to competence. Coaches can help athletes feel capable and help them see their progress by doing these things: giving specific and constructive feedback. Like, you had really nice follow through on that swing. Try to choke up a little bit on the bat next time. That's also highlighting small improvements, not just big outcomes. Setting clear expectations. Matching drills to the skill level so that athletes are challenged but not overwhelmed. And adding a little growth mindset in here, normalizing mistakes as part of growth. Because athletes who feel competent will compare less and they'll be more focused and attentive. And lastly, coaches can support relatedness by helping athletes feel like they belong. I cannot even emphasize how important belonging is. That's a whole nother podcast. So coaches can do this by learning about their athletes as people, not just performers, and also having the athletes learn about each other. They can create team rituals, check-ins, partner work, gratitude moments, acknowledge effort and character, not just stats, and ask values-based questions. What kind of teammate do you want to be? How do you want people to feel when they play with you? And coaches can model respect, compassion, and inclusion. And when relatedness is strong, jealousy and envy dissolve, creating a much more supportive culture.
Right, right. Oh, that would be so awesome.
You didn't have that?
No, I didn't.
Wow.
No, I had a very hard college experience, which we can talk about on a different,
Yes,
a different pod.
I would love to talk about that college experience on a different podcast because coaches who use self-determination theory aren't lowering their standards, they're raising psychological safety. And when athletes feel safe, capable, and connected, they're going to push themselves harder, stay longer, and then likely bounce back faster. It's a really smart way to go about coaching. I wish I knew this when I was coaching high school girls rugby. I have a belief that we did this without knowing we did it, and I also know that we can always do better. All right, Fairport High School Rugby Club, now's your chance. Drop a comment. Let us know. How'd we do? See what I did there? I asked for feedback. Even though I'm not still coaching, something that self-determination theory highlights is the importance of intrinsic motivation. That is, doing things for the sake of the enjoyment of it, for the satisfaction or the feeling of pride or some kind of internal value. Intrinsic motivation has more staying power. It's very helpful for long-term goals and keeping us engaged in activities for the long haul. And then there's extrinsic motivation, and that's doing something for some kind of external reward, like for the cheers or for the likes or for money or a prize. And we can use external motivation in order to develop internal motivation, but that's a whole nother podcast. The long of the short is this. We can use external reward systems like points and stars in order to build competence. And then once the competence is built, then the enjoyment happens, then the satisfaction occurs. However, if we're relying solely on external reward systems like likes, cheers, claps, compliments, that's when we see things shifting from being internal and genuine to something more external. And that's usually where burnout begins. Not dramatically, just really quietly. And the sport stops being about enjoyment and starts being about expectation, approval, or performance. When I was doing bodybuilding, I like had to stop because I was so burnt out. And I was going to grad school and I couldn't think. And I remember going to the gym and just like, as soon as I stopped bodybuilding, it was like the weight, quite literally, was like lifted off my shoulders. And I would go to the gym and I just would look around and was like, what? Like, I don't like being here anymore.
Right, right.
And I don't think I ever want to do that again because it got so caught up in the likes, like, you know, posting pictures of my my transformation and posting pictures of my wins, and then like people liking me quite literally for my body.
Right. I think a lot of college athletes get caught up in that too, of like the status of being a collegiate athlete and all the gear and all of the photo shoots and all of the places you get to go and the travel that you get to do. And oh yeah, and it's easy to keep going for something other than yourself and other than the true joy that you once got for it when you were a kid or once had when you were a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think knowing where you are with it, like staying true to to how you feel about the game. If it's too much, like being able to say it's too much, being able to say when you need a break. Yeah.
And here's where we'll shift a little bit. What's interesting about burnout is that it doesn't just apply to athletes. And often these habits of overperforming, pushing through, needing external validation, they often show up in the workplace. And I want to revisit imposter syndrome because when you've spent years proving yourself, it's easy to feel like you have to keep doing that in your career. Like you can't slow down, or you can't ask questions, or you can't show uncertainty. Bosses, this is where self-determination theory is also very helpful. So now we're going to shift into how burnout or how high achievers become self-doubters in the workplace and why so many high achievers feel like they're faking it even when they're not. Imposter syndrome is also a thinking mistake. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen. We'll talk about thinking mistakes there. I was asked to give a presentation on dialectical behavior therapy for children to the North Carolina Psychological Association.
Oh, wow.
For an hour, just an hour, like lunch and learn.
Yeah.
And all I could think of the whole time when I was doing this, I was so anxious, like so super sweaty, and was all of these people already know what I'm talking about, and they're going to point out all the things that I did wrong. Like, they're going to ask me questions I'm not going to be able to answer, and then they're going to find out. I don't know. But, like, I know.
I think that's also, like, a huge strength to, like, admit when you don't know something.
Yes. Yes. You know what? Absolutely is. Here's my little, I'm going to stand up on my soapbox again. You know, if you go to a job interview and they ask you something like, why do you want to work here? Here's the great answer. I know I have a lot to learn and I don't know everything. And I can see that this would be a place where I can really grow my knowledge, my skill, my confidence, because I really want to learn more from people around me. Right? Like, isn't that fire?
Honestly, too, like, I think when your colleagues, like, hear you say something like that, they're like, okay, come in. And then they welcome you with open arms. Like, let me teach you everything I know. Please do. I think that's what happened. I think that was my experience, to be honest.
And lucky us, right? We worked in therapy offices where people are more empathic and, I think, for the most part, understanding. And I can understand if maybe you're in the medical world, or you're an architect or an engineer, or maybe in sales, how that kind of environment might not be as safe to show your vulnerabilities. And if you go, I want to learn from you, I want to be like you,
right?
They might go,
might not land,
but also it might, you know, the story you're telling yourself in that moment could be like, if I show my vulnerabilities, then people won't trust me. They'll think I'm stupid. They won't want to work with me. They'll think I'm incompetent. The list goes on. And it could actually go the opposite direction. The person could say, oh, hey, this person really wants to learn from me, or this person looks up to me, or I need this person to be able to do things the way that the company does them so that we can do it more efficiently.
Exactly. Talk about, like, performance-based too, like performance anxiety. I know we're spending a lot of time talking about, like, sports, and also, like, shining light on, like, life after sports too, of life within your career, or even, like, for younger people too. I want this to also help the musicians out there, or I don't know what other performance-based activity, the singers, or the arts-based.
Writers. It could be anything. It can be really anything, right? Like
speakers,
mathematicians, whatever, statisticians, any of those things. We could sit here and talk forever. We already know that. And I think we have to wrap it up. So what is something that, you know, this whole podcast is about being real in the space between. And I so appreciate you sharing some of your more vulnerable moments in life. And
of course.
Thank you so much for coming, Mare. I am so love spending time with you and sitting here, and in the future, because I'm going to have you on again, I'm sure of it, we're going to video these.
Oh, even better.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm so glad you get to do this now.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Bye.
This is going to take you hours to edit.
And it did. It took hours to edit. In all transparency, Meredith was my first interviewee, and I learned a lot. There's more structure to the next episodes, and I'm so excited for you all to hear what's in store. You'll hear about sex-positive parenting, neurospiciness, and the weight of internalized weight bias. We'll also be sharing stories of self-reclamation and somatic experiencing and healing your nervous system. Subscribe and comment. Let me know more of what you want to hear about. If you'd like to work with Meredith, or maybe you think your child would benefit from working with her, you can find her at 3C Family Services in Morrisville, North Carolina. And if you live in North Carolina, but nowhere near Morrisville, don't worry, Meredith does telehealth too. And you can find me, Dr. Jess Hayden, at Simply Centered Psychological Services in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I have special licensure and can do telehealth in 40 states. Check out my website for more information. I'll drop all the links in the description. Simply Heard, the space between, is meant for educational purposes only, and it's not a replacement for therapy. If you find yourself struggling or need immediate help, dial 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Hotline. Thanks for listening. Until next week, take care.